You're listening to episode 101 of the Fed and Fearless podcast. On today's episode, I'm chatting with nutritional therapy practitioner Lexie Gray about how circadian rhythms affect our sleep and our health, and how to take action steps that can help you improve your sleep immediately. So stay tuned. Welcome to the Fed and Fearless podcast. I'm your host, Laura Schoenfeld, a registered dietitian, nutrition business coach, and online entrepreneur with over 10 years of experience in online business. And I'm here to show you everything I've learned about creating a life and a business that nourishes you. On this podcast, we'll talk about the lifestyle habits, practical strategies, mindset shifts, and leaps of faith required to build a healthy body, a powerful mind, a strong spirit, and a successful business. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Fed and Fearless podcast. I'm Laura Schoenfeld, your host as always, and we have a really great episode for you today. I feel like all of our episodes are great, but I really enjoyed having this conversation with my guest today about a topic that I feel like can feel a little bit overly discussed or overhashed or just kind of like, oh yeah, I know all this stuff. But honestly, I learned some things today that I didn't know about sleep and circadian rhythms. And so I assume that you guys are going to learn some stuff as well. So our guest today is Lexie Gray. Lexie is a nutritional therapy practitioner and certified personal trainer who believes in making healthy living simple. She works alongside women who love strength training to help them improve their sleep with sustainable diet and lifestyle changes for enhanced energy and real results. Through one-on-one and group coaching, Lexie realized that quality of sleep was her client's biggest hurdle to successful changes. Her holistic health coaching programs focus on less stress and more sleep for happier women with healthier habits. So we go into a deep dive on what affects our sleep, how to know that we're struggling with sleep, even if we're sleeping for a long period of time, because as I'm sure you guys can guess, quality is just as important, if not more important than quantity when it comes to sleep. We also discuss how to know if things like REM sleep is an issue, how to track things, lots of different things that are going to help you optimize your sleep, whether or not you're dealing with substantial sleep issues or you just want to feel your best and perform at a high level. Especially if you're an entrepreneur like me, any little tweak we can make to perform better, to have better energy, and to really be able to tackle our day is always appreciated. So I really enjoyed the conversation. I think you're going to enjoy it too. And without further ado, here is Lexie Gray. All right, everybody. Well, I am so excited to have with me on the Fed and Fearless podcast today, Lexie Gray. Welcome to the show, Lexie.
Thanks so much for having me, Laura. I'm excited.
Awesome. Well, I would love if you could take a couple of minutes to share your story with our audience, especially if they don't know you yet, about how you got interested in helping women overcome sleep challenges.
Totally. Well, like many people in the health and wellness world, it came from, struggles of my own that I've dealt with. So started around college. I had always had digestive issues, skin problems, headaches, that kind of thing. But when I got to college, I started having this insane fatigue. So I was sleeping more than I was awake, but no matter what, I was always still tired. And I was just so curious, how can I be sleeping so much and I'm still so tired? And I attribute it, to being a college athlete and working and, all the things, but I should still be able to stay awake for my classes. And I would literally fall asleep, unable to keep myself awake. So once I realized that was not normal, I went and got some blood work done. I found out that I was celiac, but along with that, my iron stores were super duper low. So my body was basically running on fumes. So I realized that not only do I need to cut gluten, obviously, make some lifestyle changes, but my doctor also said, you need to go get some iron infusions. And I learned so much through that whole process, just about what it looks like to treat this holistically. And obviously, I made a complete 180 once I made those changes and all of those things. But I was still needing to sleep a lot. And so through all of those challenges, I just realized that, you know what, this is a huge issue. Like a lot of women are not able to sleep enough, or, they're just not getting good quality sleep. So even if you're sleeping a ton and waking up tired, there's, something to work on there. So it just hooked me immediately into this whole world. So I decided I wanted to become a nutritional therapy practitioner. And I also just loved movement and fitness and all that stuff. So I went through NASM and got my certified personal trainer. So I kind of just went all in and decided that I was going to help women get restorative sleep that actually helps them to feel good in the morning.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I can imagine you were still eating gluten when you found out you were celiac. So I can imagine if you have massive gut inflammation and immune response and probably a lot of micronutrient deficiencies caused by that. I'm sure that was like a pretty big piece of the puzzle. But like you said, there was stuff that went beyond just fixing those really serious issues to get the actual result that you wanted to get.
Yeah, definitely. And it made me realize that nutrition is not all that there is, because before that I kind of, just rested it all on that. But it's definitely a whole puzzle.
Mm-hmm. So I know that you talk about circadian rhythms and how that affects sleep. And we do have a pretty educated audience as far as understanding some of the more complex terms. But for anyone who doesn't know what circadian rhythms are, can you just give a little definition so that when we talk about them, people know what we're discussing?
Yeah, for sure. It's one of those things where like, well, yeah, we know the general idea of it, but it's super complex. So I'll kind of just keep it easy. But it's basically the internal processes that our bodies follow on this 24-hour cycle. So we have these different genes and proteins in our bodies, and they have this rhythmic activity, and those are called body clocks. So the master clock is the suprachiasmatic nucleus, but we'll just call it SCN. And it's found in the brain, but we also have peripheral clocks like in the liver, the gut, the pancreas, and they all work together to provide feedback to that master clock. So in order to keep our bodies on schedule, they all basically just need to be in sync with each other. So things like diet and genetics and stress and temperature and lots of things affect that. And when disrupted, that disrupts our circadian rhythms. So, and I think we probably all know that it's very related to sleep, but it also affects things like our appetite, our hormones, our body temperature, blood pressure, and tons of other things. So it's it's a pretty cool thing to dive into if you're interested in nerding out on all that stuff.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people, when they think about circadian rhythms, they assume it's just this like one thing, right? It's almost like your insulin levels and how those fluctuate. It's like, oh, if your insulin's high or it's low or it's, balanced or whatever you want to say. But I don't think a lot of people are aware that the clock system is not just one clock. Now, is the suprachiasmatic nucleus, is that is that the word? I'm like, I used to know way more about this stuff, and then I got into all the business and marketing things, and all my scientific names and everything are just more difficult now. But is that something where that clock affects all the other ones and really is like the control clock, or do the other clocks in our body actually then affect the SCN clock?
Yeah, totally. I mean, both, right? So like the master clock is kind of like overseeing the whole body, but the pancreas and the gut and the liver, like those are also sending feedback to the master clock. So yeah, they're all definitely connected.
Mm-hmm. I feel like most people wouldn't necessarily think about things like your pancreas affecting your circadian rhythms. That's really great that you're explaining that, because I do think most people, when they think about circadian rhythms, they get to the point of like, oh, I get the light and dark cycle and, whether or not I'm getting light in my eyes in the morning and then having dark at night. But it sounds like there's a lot of different things that affect that, and it goes well beyond just light exposure.
Totally.
So what kind of lifestyle habits are going to influence people's circadian rhythms?
Yeah, well, like you just said, light and dark is that's a huge one. Exposing yourself to light as soon as you can in the morning. I think we know that pretty well. But some ways to know, like if you're getting enough light first thing in the morning, because you actually can't really impact your circadian rhythm after, a certain time. So if you wake up around 6, 7, 8 a.m., you want to get outside as soon as you can, because by about 9 or 10 a.m., that light will not be able to really impact your circadian rhythm anymore. So
Mm-hmm.
you want to get outside, get about 100,000 lux is what they call them before 9 or 10 a.m. And there's a really cool app. It's called Light Meter. And you can actually use your phone and you point the face of your phone, not the camera, at the sun or a light bulb or your computer, and you can actually see how many lux you're getting, which is really interesting.
So wait, you said the 1,000 lux, that's if you had your phone out, it could be getting 1,000. It's not like you're accumulating like lux, right? That might sound like a really silly question, but you're not like,
No.
oh, I'm getting 100 lux per minute. So then now I'm out there for 10 minutes, I've gotten 1,000.
Right. No, that's a great question. But typically in the morning time, you're not going to get as much lux, right? So you want to get 100,000 before 9 or 10 a.m. But those specific rays of light are actually really what you need. So even though later in the day, you could get, 200,000 lux, if you're outside for 30 minutes or so, it wouldn't be the same as those morning rays. So yeah, you want to sit outside, honestly, as much as you can. I know we're all busy. We have things to get to. So even if it's only 5 minutes, like that would be a great place to start.
Mm-hmm. Now I'm really curious because I have a alarm clock that lights up before the actual alarm goes off. So it doesn't like just turn on, but it has that like starts with a bit of an orange light and then turns into a white light as soon as it gets to the actual time. I'm going to guess it's not the same thing as getting morning light, but I do find, even this morning, I woke up before my alarm, which my alarm was set for, I think like 6:45. So I woke up because the light was shining. So any thoughts?
Yeah.
I'm not asking, because it's not like I'm like, oh, tell me what I should do, but I'm just curious because that is something we've talked about on, I think, previous episodes where we discussed having a alarm clock like that. For me, it's really more to avoid phone use in the morning, but
Right.
I'm curious if that's something that affects light exposure or it's just like an alternative wake up strategy.
Oh, no, I'm so glad you asked, because there's actually research that shows that turning on a light, even if it's artificial, will help you get more REM sleep in that last little bit of your sleep cycle. So yeah, you go, girl.
Oh, wow. I was going to say, I'm like, I had no idea. I was literally just trying to stay off Instagram in the morning. So, but it doesn't matter that it's artificial. It's just having that light in general.
Right. And obviously, like, we want to be outside in natural light, but for that purpose of like getting woken up and increasing your REM sleep, totally great.
Oh, that's awesome. Now I'm like, good investment. It was like less than $50 on Amazon. So cool. So what other kind of habits, either for better or worse, can affect circadian rhythms?
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say next biggest, but temperature and light are like the two big ones. So your body follows this natural temperature pattern, or it should. And so getting closer to bedtime, your body should be starting to cool down. And then throughout the night, it should be at its lowest about 2 hours before you wake up. So they call that like your temperature minimum. So whatever time that is that you normally wake up, 2 hours before would be like the lowest that your body temperature should be. So those of us who are, waking up hot regularly in the middle of the night, or, they actually shown that insomniacs have this dysregulation of their core body temperature. So temperature is a huge one. And obviously you can't necessarily control that like in the moment, but we can do things like before we go to bed, turning the thermostat on, turning fans on, or do you want to get really fancy, you could get one of those mattress cooling pads. We have one and I'm obsessed with it. So those are really cool too. But yeah, light and temperature, I'd say, are probably the two biggest factors. Of course, there are lots of other things that impact it, like our blood sugar. You mentioned that your audience is very familiar with that. So that's going to affect our insulin, which obviously affects everything else. And it's also just going to wake us up in the middle of the night as well. So it's like, yeah, there's a lot of factors that go into it, but light, temperature, and blood sugar, I'd say, are the big three we can focus on.
Mm-hmm. The temperature thing's interesting because on one hand, you want to say, well, like, why does it have to be so, controlled or complicated? But then if I think about the fact that up until, gosh, I'm trying to think when houses would have really been a thing. Like you would think there would be thousands of years where humans were really sleeping fairly in the elements. And so, even in hotter areas, it does cool off at night, even if it's hot during the day, right? It might still be hot. I mean, I've definitely been in places like Costa Rica and stuff where it doesn't really get that cool overnight. But I always thought that was interesting how the optimal body or the optimal temperature is what, like 65 to 70 or something for
sleep.
Yeah. And then I think about like, how do these people survive in like the equator where it's like, 90 degrees at 1:00 in the morning or something. But,
totally.
But I feel like nowadays, because of air conditioning and heat and all of that, that the temperature in the house wouldn't necessarily change at all, whether it's daytime, like middle of the day versus 2:00 in the morning. Right.
Yeah. And it really makes sense when you think about it from just a biological perspective, because what else could every cell in your body recognize the same way except for temperature, right? So it's like, it makes a lot of sense that that's one of the big factors.
That is interesting. I never thought about it that way, but I mean, obviously light, there's only so much light that can really penetrate into your skin. And then even certain hormones, not all the hormones that get produced are going to actually access all the different cells. So that's actually a really interesting point. I never thought about it that way. Cool. Awesome. So if somebody is not getting enough sleep or they're not sleeping well, because I'm sure you would agree that quantity isn't the only thing that matters, right? Like you were saying before, you could be in bed for over 12 hours sleeping and still not feel like you had gotten enough. So if somebody's not getting enough good sleep, what are some of the health effects that they might start to notice? I mean, obviously there's the tiredness piece, which I think most people could easily recognize, but are there any other things that people could be looking out for that could be directly caused by sleep issues?
Yeah. And I mean, it's one of those things that affects every part of our lives, right? But some of the main things that you might see, and it's funny because it's like a chicken or egg situation, right? Where it's like, did the bad sleep cause this, or am I not sleeping because XYZ? So it is kind of one of those things. But, if you're having blood sugar crashes in the middle of the afternoon, or if your cortisol patterns are not right, that is obviously directly related to sleep. If you are not recovering well from workouts, or if you are just having this trouble seeing results that you're looking for. So a lot of people are like, well, I'm working out, X amount of times a week. Why am I not seeing results? And the truth is that during your deep sleep is when you are seeing, those physiological, really more bodily focused results, right? We're getting that recovery, we're getting that rest that we need for our body. But then the REM sleep is actually not the same as deep sleep. That is more focused towards like our mental, emotional, spiritual well-being. So we can also see mental aspects as well, such as like brain fog or anxiety, depression. All of those things can be really related to a lack of REM sleep. So yeah, it's one of those things that kind of permeates all areas of our lives.
Now with the REM sleep thing, obviously there's a way for people to measure that in general. I mean, we wouldn't know about it if it wasn't measurable. Is that what some of those trackers like the Aura Ring or something like that, is that what they're able to actually tell you is what amount of time you spent in that type of sleep?
Yeah. And I mean, obviously there's room for error with all of these devices, but I have a Whoop, which does the same thing. And even like the cooling mattress that we have tracks your sleep as well. So there's tons of ways to kind of track this, and you can, use too, if you want to kind of compare them and see if they're pretty accurate or not. But yeah, those trackers can be super helpful. They'll break it down into light sleep, deep sleep, and REM sleep. So you can kind of see how much time you're spending in each. Are you going through the cycles efficiently? Because like we said, quality is just as important as quantity, right? So yeah, seeing how you're sleeping first is a really good place to start if you have access to one of those.
Is this mattress thing a mattress topper, or is it an actual mattress?
So it's a mattress topper.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, but it's like, it does all of the things. We're very happy with it.
Yeah. Is that the Ula or I forget? There's a couple brands.
Yeah, it's the 8 Sleep.
8 Sleep.
Yeah.
We'll have to
cool.
We'll have to look for some links to put in the bio or the show notes, because this, I mean, the Whoop I think I've heard of, but that's definitely a newer one that I've seen. And then this, you said 8 Sleep. Is it like the number 8?
Yeah. Yeah.
I've not heard of that one before. So,
so like 8 hours of sleep.
Oh, very, very simple naming strategy there. So if somebody was getting enough total time, so like, let's say they're getting like 8, like I know it's like 7 to 9 is kind of the range, but let's say they're getting around like 8 or 9 hours of sleep, but they weren't really going through those cycles, or they weren't getting the REM sleep, the amount that they were supposed to get. Is that only something you could figure out by actually tracking, or is there any specific ways that you could tell that that's not working well for you without having that hard data?
Yeah, I mean, I would honestly just go off of how you feel. So if you wake up in the morning feeling rested, that's probably a really good sign. You know, if you're waking up and it's hard to get out of bed, not just because, you know, you don't want to get up, but like you are physically fatigued, that's a really good sign. Because I mean, sleeping 14, 15 hours a day, I was still feeling like I had to drag my feet out of bed. So I would totally use your intuition there.
Yeah. Well, now I'm like selfishly picking your brain, because I think one of the things I've noticed is even if I get a total amount of sleep that seems like it would be appropriate, there are a lot of days that I wake up and it could be that I just got a lot going on and it's like, oh man, this is going to be a busy day. But now I'm wondering, I'm like, I wonder if I got one of those trackers like the Whoop or something, if I would notice that there's an issue there, because there are days that I'm like, I don't know why I'm tired. Like I went to bed early enough. Like, it's not, I do set an alarm to get up usually no later than, 7 during the week for work, and it's not like I'm like exhausted the whole day. It's just that initial waking up period is like, oh, I could really just stay in bed right now. So I don't know if it's a REM sleep issue or if it's just like I need to get my business a little bit less hectic. So I'm not so like, I'm like, I have so much stuff to do during the day, but that might be something. I don't know. I'm curious if you have an opinion about it. Like if you just have that little bit of early morning kind of like slow to get up kind of stuff, if that's indicative of an actual sleep issue, or if that's kind of more of a, rest of the day needs to be addressed from a stress perspective. Not that I'm not like super stressed, but when I look at my very full calendar, I'm like, ooh, okay, let's do this.
Totally. Well, yeah. So there are definitely lots of factors that can impact the quality of your sleep. So, that would be something to experiment with and see, on the nights that I drink alcohol, do I wake up feeling rested? Or, if I had my caffeine a little bit too late in the afternoon. So there's a lot of research that shows that even if the caffeine is not affecting your ability to go to sleep, your quality might not be as good. And the same is true if you're taking, any sort of sleep aids or anything like that. Those all impact the quality. Even if you're like, wow, I passed out just like that, it's not going to be the same quality, and same with melatonin as well. So you're going to get a different quality of sleep than you would if you were following your body's natural rhythms.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I feel like one of the things that, like, just in a mastermind I'm in this year, one of our main focuses has been performance. And that's like personal performance, business performance, team performance, all the different areas of entrepreneurship that you can increase performance. And I always think about like sleep and energy as being a really important one. And it seems like at least for entrepreneurs and people that have like online businesses and stuff, it does seem like a really important thing to maximize, because even if you quote unquote sleep enough, it's like if you're waking up and like I said, I mean, once I'm up and moving, I try to work out in the morning, and then we have a red light device, which I don't know if you have any opinion about that, but I try to use it in the morning when I first get up to just kind of like get some stimulation. But and I'm like experimenting with, and not that you care, but I'm just trying to share some of my personal experimentation here. I'm experimenting with significantly cutting down on caffeine, trying not to have alcohol every night, even like a glass of wine, right? It really does make a difference, just one glass of wine versus 0, but just a couple of those tweaks here and there. And it's like, it's not debilitating by any means. It's probably not even that significant, but I always wonder, I'm like, man, if I just had like a little bit more energy, would that affect how well I could get my work done or how productive I could be? Because there are times where, like even yesterday I had put it on my calendar to record a podcast, and I was just like, oh, like I just don't have the mental energy to do this right now. So I ended up doing it today, which was fine. But I just wonder, is that a sleep thing, or is that just like life is too busy and I need to slow down? And I'm not asking you to diagnose me. It's just, I think a lot of, especially because I spend a lot of time with entrepreneurs, it just seems like a lot of them will kind of just power through not having the best energy, and they'll like drink a ton of coffee to kind of like just get them through it. And as somebody who's dealt with like quote unquote adrenal fatigue and hormone issues and everything, I try to be a lot more mindful of that. But then it's a matter of like, okay, I'm functional, I'm quote unquote healthy, but am I operating at my peak? And is there something that I could actually experience that would be better if I were to make some changes? So that was a lot of information that I just shared, but that's kind of what I think about. Cause it's like, I think there's obviously people who have like significant sleep issues, kind of like what you were describing. And then there's people who it's not as obvious. It's like kind of more subtle, and it's like they may not even know that it's something that could benefit them or that would make a really big impact on their day-to-day life.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I touched on this a little bit earlier, but stress and sleep are completely connected, right? So because our circadian rhythm is affected by stress, so is sleep. And so even if we're, not feeling overly stressed, but we just have this chronically high cortisol, that can definitely impact, our melatonin production at night. And it could definitely be something to experiment with, for sure.
I mean, I definitely think compared to a lot of business owners out there, I don't run on stress hormones the way that a lot of people do. So I feel like I'm one of those people that's pretty good at taking care of myself. It's, I guess that's what happens when you kind of mess things up in the past, as I'm sure you could, commiserate with. But it's one of these things where I'm just never willing to mess my health up for the pursuit of business stuff. And I do see a lot of entrepreneurs that are like, in my world, in my mastermind that I'm in, that kind of thing. And just the way that they're pushing themselves so hard, it's like, ooh, I don't know. Is that like really the best way to do it? So, but it's hard because it's like we just live in this society that, like, I don't know, just glorifies productivity and being busy all day and, burning the midnight oil. And especially for women, it's like, I just don't think that's necessarily even, more productive to do it that way versus if you were setting your lifestyle up to optimize your sleep and keep stress as low as possible.
Yeah. And especially, I'm glad you mentioned that, but like, the fact that we're just constantly inundated with blue light is another big one too, right? So, after dark, what are we all doing? We're either working. If you're an entrepreneur, you're on your computer still working, or if you're, just watching TV, relaxing with your family. It's like, what else do we do after dark? And, that's a big thing too, where some people say, well, it doesn't affect my sleep. Like I fall asleep fine. But again, it's like the caffeine, it's still going to affect the quality, even if it doesn't affect the quantity.
Yeah. I mean, it's so funny. When I was in Costa Rica, gosh, it had to be like at least 5 years ago at this point. I don't remember exactly when I was there, but I was staying at a resort that really didn't have electricity. I mean, it had a little bit, it had like emergency level electricity, but the room I was in didn't have it. Like I had a little candle that I could light if I needed to, and there wasn't really any Wi-Fi. So by the time it was 9 o'clock and it was dark and there wasn't anything to really do, I just went to bed. Like I literally just went to sleep, and then I would wake up at maybe 5:30 just naturally with the sun. And it was something where it's like, man, that would have been really nice to have my life. And I have full control, so I could do it if I wanted to. But it's almost like there's this, I don't know how to describe it other than saying it almost feels like, oh man, I don't want to go to bed because this is like my relaxation time. And I have a lot of work I have to do tomorrow. And I just kind of want to like veg out, like you were saying, like watch some TV or do whatever. And I always ask myself, I mean, my husband likes to like watch stuff too. So it's not just my decision, although I'm obviously an adult. I could do it without his involvement. But it's really hard to not do things like TV, especially in the last year. I'm sure you've seen this a lot where with COVID and everything, it's like, well, I got nothing else to do. Might as well just watch a movie or something. Or, it's a stressful day. There's a lot of stuff happening in the world. I just want to like watch some kind of comedy. We've been watching a lot of like 90s comedies and stuff. I'm like, oh, the good old days when everything was dumb and, we all looked stupid. Like,
yes.
So anyway, it's just one of these things where it's so tough. It's like, obviously we're the ones that have control over this, but I mean, what would you say? Because I'm sure you work with a lot of clients that have this issue where it's like, oh, I know I shouldn't be doing this, but it's so hard. Like, how do you respond to that?
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I'm a fan of, a good Netflix show. Like I'm on the same page. And so most importantly, just get some good blue blockers. I mean, that's probably the best thing you can do because we're not going to go to bed when the sun does, most of us, except in the wintertime. Then I'm in bed at, 8 p.m. But, as long as you have a good pair that blocks all blue light, all green light, because green light isn't really talked about either, but blue blocks is the one that I love because it is like tested and shown to actually block what it says it blocks, which a lot of brands don't, which is totally, fine. But get a good pair, invest in one pair, and then you'll have them forever. And then just give yourself a bedtime. Give yourself a screen time bedtime, and then an actual bedtime. So if you're going to go to bed at, 10, I would say at least 30 minutes would be like a bare minimum, but an hour would be even better where there's no blue light at all. Obviously, your light bulbs in your ceiling are probably blue light, but as much as you can, not having screens in front of you, do something calming like read a book, take a bath, or, use this as some time to be creative, even if you want to draw or something that you enjoy, but is not going to stimulate your eyes.
Yeah, we're really bad about that. I feel like it's hard when you're married and it's like, well, that's just our habit. It's our routine. And I really don't like, if I don't see my husband for a lot of the day, it's like, oh, that's our time together and that's what he wants to do. So I definitely get it. It's a trade-off, right? You have to kind of decide what's most important to you. And for some people, it's like, well, spending that time with my spouse or my kids or whatever and watching a movie together is more important than having perfect sleep. So no judgment on that, but I definitely see that it's one of these like, it's easy to get stuck in a routine, obviously, and it's easy to create routines that are not intentional. And, if you actually stop to evaluate them, you're like, actually, this isn't really that beneficial. And, I think a lot of people, especially since 2020, it's just like we've gotten into some real bad habits about, how to cut our stress down and everything. So I think this hopefully is just a little nudge for people to start looking at their habits and asking themselves if it's something that is actually adding value to their lives.
Yeah. And you touched on too there, the routine piece that's huge for building better sleep, right? So instead of looking at your current routine and being like, oh, this is terrible, just say, what's one thing that I can change from this routine to take a step towards better sleep? Or, so instead of watching TV until I go to bed, I'm going to go 10 minutes before bed, or, just like slowly cutting back, or saying I'm going to get blue light blockers. That's one step in the right direction. So yeah, just creating that routine slowly. You don't have to just go all in all at once, but slowly making those changes make a huge difference.
I will say one thing we've always done is we never have had a TV in our bedroom. And I honestly can't even imagine having a TV in your bedroom, because it's like you're literally getting that light stimulation in bed. So when you're saying have some separation, it's like if you're literally shutting the TV off and then like laying down in your bed, that's probably the minimum, like the least amount of separation that could possibly exist. So that is one thing that I don't know how people function with a TV in their bedroom, but that's definitely never going to happen for us, because I think that would stress me out to have that.
Totally. And that even like makes me think of, if you've read Atomic Habits by James Clear, favorite book. It's like the best, but making your bad, or, quote unquote bad habits hard and making your good habits easy. So that would be like a really easy first step of, I'm just going to take the TV out of the bedroom, because you're making it harder for you to do that. So yeah, that's a big piece.
Yeah. I have a friend who she's definitely a little bit more on the side of not technophobe, but I think she has like a flip phone and stuff. So, and I'm pretty sure they have a timer, like a Christmas tree timer on their Wi-Fi.
Nice.
And so after a certain period of or like a certain time at night, it shuts the power off to the Wi-Fi, which honestly, I think that's brilliant, because one, you can get rid of some of those, like, I don't know if it's specifically EMFs or whatever, but just like all the weird radiation and stuff that we're getting with like Wi-Fi and everything. But then also, I don't know about you, but our TV we don't have cable. We just have like the Wi-Fi and Hulu and Netflix and that kind of thing. So if you have that set up like that, and the Wi-Fi gets shut off at maybe it's 11 or 10 or whatever you want to set it at, it's like, oh, our show literally shut off, because like there's no Wi-Fi left. So I know it's a little bit more extreme than just not having a TV in your bedroom, but that is something that I've seen some people do before, where it's like they're kind of forcing themselves to get off the devices at a certain time.
Yeah, making those good habits easy. That's there you go.
or the bad habit hard, right? It's like you have to go find the timer and like turn the Wi-Fi back on and stuff. It's like, lots of different ways to do this. I'm sure Lexie has lots of tips. So actually, that leads me into my last question for you, which would be, what are some specific action steps that our listeners could do even tonight as they're listening to this that could improve their sleep immediately?
Yeah, totally. Well, my number one recommendation is always just work on your light hygiene, because that is, the biggest pretty much factor in our melatonin production. So if you want to sleep better, get outside earlier in the morning, get outside as much as you can throughout the day, but watching the sun rise and watching the sun set, that would be like a really good minimum. And then cutting off that blue light at least an hour before bed would be great. That would be step number one. If you're not able to cut off your blue light, get some blue light blockers. The second thing I would recommend is, looking into, is my blood sugar an issue? So is this something that is affecting my sleep? Am I waking up at the same time every night, around 2 or 3 a.m.? If so, that might be something to look into. Obviously, your listeners are very educated, so they probably know all about this, but a lot of people, even who are eating, whole foods, nutrient-dense diets, are still struggling with blood sugar. So thinking about that, and then, working with a practitioner, or just trying to do your own research on how you can balance that. And then the last thing, and I'm only going to give 3 today just because I want to keep it simple and easy, but the third tip would just be creating a routine. Kids have this bedtime routine that it's like, I do this, then I do this and this. And I'm sure parents will tell you that if they don't have their blankie, like, oh my gosh, it's not good, right? So if kids have this routine, why don't we? So creating some sort of, whether it's, I take a hot shower and then I, read a book and then I do XYZ, whatever it is that's going to help you tell your body, because your brain creates these associations, right? So your brain is telling your body, okay, it's time, calm down, release melatonin. So those are 3 free ways that you can immediately see some improvement in your sleep.
Yeah, maybe just skip the blankie strategy, since that might not work so well for an adult. So awesome. Well, this was really great, Lexie, and thanks for letting me ramble about my own life right now. I'm just like, it's really interesting when, even somebody who I would call myself pretty healthy. It's just like, oh, there's some stuff that still could be improved. So I know that there's a lot of people listening that maybe have that same experience where it's like their sleep is not a total disaster, but if they were to really look at it, it's like, yeah, there's probably some things I'm doing that are not optimal. So if people wanted to learn more from you and get more strategies on how to maximize their sleep, whether they're someone who just isn't sleeping well and wants to not feel like garbage anymore, or they're an entrepreneur that like really wants to maximize their brain power and their energy during the day, where can they go?
Yeah, I would say number one would be to take my sleep course. This is just a step-by-step guide that kind of walks you through all of the things and a lot more that we talked about today. There's 6 modules. So I say, do one a week for 6 weeks, and you should see really big improvements in those 6 weeks. I also include in there a home strength training program. So you don't have to have a gym membership or anything, because I do believe that movement is a really vital piece of the puzzle too, to getting our circadian rhythms working properly. So it's 6 weeks focused on sleep, 6 weeks focused on strength. It's basically all the information that I wish I had when I was healing my body. And so that would be the best place. But you can also, find me on Instagram. You can email me, old school, but I'm happy to talk through and see if I can help you, just get started in the right direction.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Lexie, for your time and your expertise. And I hope that all of you listening are going to go implement at least one thing that Lexie mentioned, and be sure to send her a DM on Instagram and let her know what you implemented and how it went, and, what you found most valuable about this episode today. So we're so excited to have you here with us, and we'll look forward to seeing you here next week on the Fed and Fearless podcast. Take care, everybody. Are you a nutritionist or dietitian struggling to figure out how much to charge for your programs and services? Maybe you've heard that as a nutritionist, you should just charge what you're worth. But this way of thinking can cause you to either undercharge your clients or work yourself into the ground trying to earn your worth. As a healthcare provider, you can't set up a pricing structure that forces you to sacrifice your own health and well-being in the name of your business and your clients. But I promise it doesn't have to be this way. When you download my free profit planning workbook, I'll walk you step by step through the 10-step process for determining the right pricing for your nutrition business. As a nutritionist, you have the power to completely change someone's life for the better. There's huge value in that, so it's time to stop underselling what you do. By following along with this worksheet, you can determine exactly what you need to charge to achieve your revenue goals with ease. I'll teach you everything I've learned about pricing from growing my own nutrition business to over $250,000 in revenue annually, and helping other dietitian and nutrition entrepreneurs hit their first $10,000 to $30,000 months and beyond. To get your free workbook, go to lauraschoenfeld.com/profit, PROFIT, and grab your copy today, so you no longer have to wonder how to set the right rates for your incredibly valuable nutrition services. That's lauraschoenfeld.com/profit. It's time to make the money that you deserve as a nutritionist, and I can't wait to help you get there.